You'll be reporting to me now, the new hire said on day one, barely out of college. He smirked like he owned the place. I just nodded and said sure. As I clocked out, I left a single envelope on his desk. 5 minutes later, he burst into the CEO's office, face pale, voice shaking, and the entire office fell silent as he started shouting. My name is Romy Calder. I'm 29. If arrogance wears a suit and tie, how long before the fabric unthreads itself? The open floor hummed, keyboards like rain on tin, the AC breathing over our shoulders. At the next pod, someone whispered, Is the espresso machine dead again? Another voice, Did anyone move the sprint board? The everyday noise tried to swallow the moment, but the shouting carved through it. This is a setup. She's targeting me. His words hit the glass walls and slid down like fingerprints. I stayed by reception, hands in the pockets of my checkered blazer, watching the CEO's door, matte black, silver handle, a slit of fear for a keyhole. My ID lanyard rested cool against my collarbone, the metal clip a small moon. The receptionist looked at me, then at the corridor, then back at me. Everything okay? She asked, like we were listening to thunder and debating umbrellas. I didn't move. The chair, by the ficus, looked like it was waiting for me to sit. I didn't. I let silence do what emails never can. Because the envelope was light, almost nothing. Just one sheet, center-aligned, 12-point serif. No threats, no drama, no HR letterhead. It simply named a policy number and a timestamp, and underneath, a single unblinking sentence. The paper was held by a teardrop paperclip, the kind you notice only when you're already nervous. He'd noticed. His shout cracked again, higher this time, and the sales team froze mid-laugh. Somewhere, the printer coughed a page into the tray, like a witness clearing its throat. I traced the edge of my lanyard and felt the calm I'd misplaced last quarter return to my fingers. He thought power was a title. I had just reminded him power is attention. And today, all of it had turned to face him. The CEO's voice was low, almost tender in its restraint. Close the door. The new hire obeyed, his hand trembling so hard it rattled the glass. The blinds slanted shadows across the carpet, slicing his panic into strips. From my spot, I caught fragments. Unprofessional, targeted, and then quieter, I didn't think anyone would know. My scarf slid against my wrist as I adjusted it, the silk one I always wore, deep plum, threads faintly frayed. It had become my talisman in this place. Every time someone dismissed me, mocked my experience, tried to outshine me, I wound the scarf tighter as though the fabric absorbed what I could not say aloud. "Why's he yelling?" whispered Maria from design, half hiding behind her monitor. "Because Romy doesn't smile when she's supposed to," muttered Josh, his eyes flicking toward me with a grin that was meant as a joke but carried weight. I gave no reaction. Let them guess. Silence is heavier than proof. Through the blinds, I saw him, the boy they'd hired to replace leadership, with fresh ideas. His forehead glistened, his jaw clenched, his gestures frantic. The CEO just sat back, one finger tapping his desk like a metronome for lies. Then the boy pulled the envelope out, waving it like it burned. Even from here, I could see the white corner tremble. A printer whirred again, ejecting copies of some quarterly report no one would read. Phones kept ringing, but no one moved to answer. Even the hum of the AC faltered. Or maybe that was just me noticing the air go still. The office had become a stage, and he'd put himself under the spotlight. I leaned against the reception counter, my reflection faint in its glass top. For the first time in months, I wasn't invisible. His panic had painted me in, and I knew this was only the opening act. The door opened with a hiss, and he stumbled out, cheeks blotched red, collar damp with sweat. His eyes darted across the room like a cornered animal searching for an exit. Every gaze followed him. The sales team froze mid-keystroke. The interns paused with their takeaway salads. Even the janitor's mop stilled mid-swipe. Silence held him like a fist. The CEO stepped out behind him, voice calm but ironclad. Everyone back to work. That tone didn't invite questions, it erased them. But the room didn't obey. Curiosity kept heads tilted, ears pricked. You can't just order gossip away. He avoided me. He could not see me. I was right there, scarf twisted twice around my wrist, anchoring me. But his glance skipped past like my shadow was too bright. He headed for his desk, fumbling with his backpack, fingers slipping on the zipper. A red folder spilled, contracts scattering across the carpet like leaves in a sudden gust. Nobody bent to help. "Everything okay, boss?" Josh called from his pod, the sarcasm sugar-coated but sharp enough to draw blood. A ripple of laughter swept the room, not loud, not cruel. Just quick, like people trying to breathe through tension. He snapped, "Shut up." Too loud, too raw. His voice cracked in the middle, and that was worse than anything he said. He gathered his papers, hands shaking so badly one page tore in half, then shoved them into his bag. His knuckles were bone white. I stayed still, watching. The smell of toner, the faint citrus of Maria's perfume, the fluorescent buzz, everything sharpened, as if the room itself wanted me to remember this moment frame by frame. The scarf's edge brushed my pulse, and I felt a clarity I hadn't in months. He had no idea what the envelope really meant. Not yet. But by the time he figured it out, it wouldn't just be him unraveling. And that knowledge was mine alone. He didn't come back after lunch. His chair sat empty, the monitor dark, his half-drunk coffee sweating into a ring on the desk. Someone whispered that he'd gone home sick. Someone else claimed HR had pulled him into a confidential debrief. I didn't correct either. Rumors are rivers. Once you let them flow, they carve their own paths. At 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a Slack ping. "CEO, step into my office." Just 6 words, but enough to draw heat into my chest. The corridor to his door felt longer than it ever had. Each step clicked against the tiles, echoing like a countdown. Inside, blinds drawn, he sat in silence. The envelope lay centered on his desk, smooth flat. He tapped it once, then looked at me. "Where did you get this?" I kept my face neutral. "From compliance archives. It was buried under revisions." "Why now?" His tone wasn't angry. It was curious. "Because he thought titles erase history," I said. The CEO leaned back, studying me. Behind him, the glass shelves held the usual trophies and photos, handshakes, launches, awards. But the air felt heavier, as if the room had just remembered it had a heart. "Policy 14B, timestamp 2021, he murmured almost to himself. "That's specific." I let the silence answer. Silence was safer than truth. When I turned to leave, his voice followed. "Romy, you've been underestimated." The scarf at my wrist slid loose as I stepped out, the silk brushing my fingertips like a reminder. Outside, the office buzzed with restrained energy, heads snapping back to screens as if no one had been listening. But they had. Everyone had. By the elevators, Maria caught my eye. "Whatever you slipped him," she whispered. It worked. I smiled, faint, almost invisible, because she was wrong. It hadn't even started working yet. The next morning, his desk was stripped bare. No mug, no jacket, no stack of neon sticky notes he used to slap on other people's screens with smug reminders. Just an empty chair turned slightly sideways, as if even it had lost patience with him. But absence doesn't erase presence. His name still hung in the air, floating between whispers and darted glances. A team lead muttered, "Guess fast tracks can derail too?" And someone else snorted softly. Even laughter was cautious now, testing boundaries. At 10 a.m., HR sent out a memo. Temporary restructuring. Project ownership will be revisited. No details, no timeline. But that was enough to set the office ablaze. Coffee runs became strategy huddles. Slack channels flooded with side eyes disguised as emojis. I moved through it quietly, scarf knotted high against my throat, letting the fabric absorb the chatter. Every thread felt like it held a secret. The truth was simple. I hadn't taken him down. He had carried his own weight into the fire. All I did was strike a match where the wood was driest. At noon, I found the CEO by the copy machine, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp. He didn't look at me, but his voice cut through the whirring machine. He'll come back. They always do. Pride doesn't resign. It hides, then returns louder. I paused, the scent of warm toner and paper thick in the air. And when he does... The CEO's jaw flexed, then softened. That's your move, isn't it? I didn't answer, because he was right. Later, as I sat at my desk, I noticed something odd. His login screen flickered back on, a ghost of his presence. A half-loaded email, draft, blinked on the monitor. He had been writing to the board, not to apologize, to accuse. The scarf tightened around my wrist, as if it knew. This wasn't over. He was coming back, and when he did, the real test of silence and proof would begin. By Thursday, his shadow returned before he did. A slammed door in the far hallway, a too loud laugh in the break room, unfamiliar but forced. Then his figure by the window, jacket wrinkled, tie hanging loose, eyes rimmed in red. He'd come back not as a leader but as a storm. He walked straight to his desk, ignoring the stairs. The chair squealed when he dropped into it, and the sound was sharp enough to cut the room in half. His fingers pounded the keyboard, emails firing like bullets. Slack pings lit up every corner of the office. Accusations, counterclaims, little grenades rolled under doors. And then the announcement, a town hall meeting for PM, mandatory attendance. His name wasn't on it, the CEO's was, but everyone knew who it was about. I wrapped the scarf tighter, the silk warm against my skin. Each twist was a promise, patience, then precision. At 4, we crowded into the glass conference room. Rows of chairs, projector humming, the scent of burnt coffee hanging heavy. He stood at the side, trying to look unbothered, but his hands betrayed him, tugging at his sleeve, adjusting the mic, shuffling papers that had nothing written on them. The CEO started. Concerns have been raised. His tone was deliberate, unhurried. But clarity requires evidence. That was my cue. My folder slid onto the table with a soft thud. Inside, archived messages, receipts, flagged compliance notes. Nothing dramatic, just fragments of truth stacked in order. Paper doesn't shout. It whispers until silence itself leans in. He lunged, snatching the folder, flipping pages like he could tear holes in time. This is out of context. His voice cracked, rising too fast, too loud. The projector light carved him in pale blue, his face a mask of panic and fury. Around me, colleagues exchanged looks, not of loyalty to him, but of quiet recognition. Because context doesn't need defense when the facts are already breathing. And in that moment, the office stopped belonging to him. It belonged to the silence pressing in after every one of his words. The meeting dissolved into murmurs. People avoided eye contact with him, eyes darting instead to the papers he clutched like a drowning man holding driftwood. He tried to speak again, but the words tangled in his throat. She planted this, he stammered, pointing at me, but his fingers shook too hard to hold steady. The CEO's gaze didn't shift. Policy violations don't plant themselves, he said evenly. The scarf on my wrist brushed the table as I leaned forward. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Silence worked better than any argument. He filled it with his own unraveling. Across the room, Maria coughed into her sleeve, covering what might have been a laugh. Josh tapped his pen twice, eyes wide but entertained. Even the interns sat straighter, sensing they were watching the kind of moment people reference for years. He slammed the folder shut and shoved it toward me. You think this makes you better than me? His voice cracked again, high-pitched, desperate. I finally looked at him. No, I said softly, the words landing like glass beads on the floor. It makes me patient. Gasps circled the room. Not dramatic, just small intakes of breath. enough to shift the air. The projector light flickered, buzzing faintly, throwing his shadow long and thin across the wall behind me. For once, it looked smaller than mine. The CEO stood, ending it. "This conversation is finished. HR will handle the rest." He opened his mouth to fight, but the weight of the room pressed down. His words died there, in the hollow of his chest. He gathered his things, messy, frantic, pages jutting out, and left the conference room without another glance. The scarf slid loose against my wrist, soft as a sigh, because the revenge wasn't the evidence or the silence or even his downfall. It was the fact that everyone had seen him break, and no one would ever forget it. The office felt different the next morning, lighter, though no one said why. His desk was gone. The chair wheeled into storage, his name already scrubbed from the internal directory. HR called it a mutual separation, but truth never needed that many syllables. Everyone had seen. Everyone remembered. I sat by the window, scarf resting loose in my lap, threads catching sunlight like veins of quiet fire. For months, I'd swallowed condescension, watching boys in pressed shirts mistake arrogance for leadership. And for months I had said nothing, until silence became sharper than any accusation. The CEO passed my desk around noon. He didn't stop, didn't smile, just nodded once. Acknowledgement without ceremony. That was enough. At 3, Maria slid a note across to me. "Coffee later?" My treat. A small gesture, but different. Not pity, not gossip, respect. The kind that grows in the cracks left after arrogance collapses. I folded the scarf neatly, tucking it into my drawer. Not as armor anymore, but as a reminder. Patience doesn't mean weakness. It means waiting until the room is ready to hear what silence already knew. And finally it had.